Welcome back to HOA Catastrophe. I thought the case was closed until they came for me. You have 5 minutes to fix this. Tiffany Wilson stood on my front porch with a laminated policy sheet in one hand and a portable radio earpiece in the other, tapping it like she was calling in an airstrike. Behind her, 2 men in reflective vests leaned against a contractor truck, pretending not to listen. One of them had a tool bag unzipped at his feet. Wrenches and pliers fanned out like evidence at a crime scene. The early morning dew was still on the grass, footprints visible where Tiffany had marched straight across my lawn instead of using the walkway. I work as a data analyst. I track patterns and timelines for a living. So when Tiffany showed up at 7 in the morning with an inspection crew and a laminated sheet, I knew this was not random. This was the same playbook she had used 3 years ago on another homeowner, the one who moved out 6 months later without ever getting answers. I had pulled those old minutes last week. Same vendor, same threats, same bright orange stamp on the photos marking them non-compliant. She pointed the laminated sheet at me like it was a warrant. The policy is clear. Your storage shed violates the setback requirement. You have until noon today to move it, or the association will move it for you and bill you for the labor. I had moved into this place in Rochester, New York 2 years ago, thinking the Briarstone Property Owners Association was just another bureaucratic headache. I was wrong. They treat records like private property. If you ask for documents, they lose them. If you question a decision, they put your name on the agenda forever until you learn respect. Tiffany was the vendor coordinator, which meant she controlled every contractor, every service tech, and every inspection crew that came into the neighborhood. If you crossed her, she sent them to your door without notice to verify compliance and provoke you. The shed had been there when I bought the house. The previous owner had permits. I had pulled the file from the city last month to confirm. But Tiffany did not care. She had decided it was non-compliant, and now she was here with muscle. One of the contractors shifted his weight and glanced at his partner. The other guy picked up a drill from the tool bag and set it back down. Tiffany caught the hesitation and barked into her radio. "Dispatch. Confirm the tow request for this address. We may need equipment removal as well." No one responded. The radio hissed static. I kept my voice calm. I submitted a records request 2 weeks ago. I asked for the original complaint, the inspection report, and the enforcement timeline. Your office denied it. Twice. Tiffany smiled. "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." That line hit me like a slap. It was the same thing she had said 3 years ago, word for word. I had found it buried in a neighbor's email chain, part of a complaint that never went anywhere. Back then, the victim had given up. This time, I was not giving up. I pulled out my phone and held it up. "I am recording this. If you remove anything from my property without following the correct process, I will file a police report and a formal complaint with the management company." Tiffany stepped closer. "If you want mercy, move somewhere without an HOA." One of the contractors cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we are just landscaping. We do not do removals without a signed work order." Tiffany spun on him. "I will call your supervisor." The guy shrugged. "Go ahead. We are not touching that shed without paperwork." She turned back to me, her face red. "You think you are clever. You think you can hide behind your little camera and your records requests. But I have been doing this for 8 years, and I know every trick. You are going to move that shed, or you are going to pay a fine. Your choice." I let her threaten a lien, because that threat would look terrible on the record. She tapped her earpiece again and walked back to the truck, muttering something I could not hear. The contractors packed up and left without another word. I stood there with my phone still recording, watching her pull out of the driveway in her sedan with a Briarstone Property Owners Association decal on the windshield. I went inside and opened my laptop. I had been tracking this case for 2 weeks, ever since I got the first denial letter. The original incident happened in 2022. A homeowner named Greg Patel had been fined $4,000 for unapproved exterior paint. He claimed he had submitted the request and received approval. The association claimed they had no record of it. Greg paid the fine and moved. Case closed. Except it was not closed. Last month, I found a portal screenshot in an old email thread Greg had forwarded to a neighbor before he left. The screenshot showed an upload confirmation with a timestamp and a reference number. I ran the metadata. The file had been created on March 3, 2022, at 2:14 in the afternoon. The association denial letter was dated March 1st. Someone had backdated the denial. I had kept that discovery quiet. I did not tell Tiffany. I did not post it in the neighborhood group chat. I just filed my own records request, asking for the same documents Greg had asked for, to see if the pattern repeated. It did. My first request was denied within 24 hours. No reason given. My second request was denied with a note that said the documents were unavailable due to a records migration. My third request triggered this morning's inspection. Tiffany was escalating because I was getting close. I opened the binder I had been building. Inside were certified mail receipts, portal screenshots, email threads, and a printed copy of the city permit for my shed. Every page was tabbed and labeled. I had learned a long time ago that the only way to fight an HOA is with a clean paper trail. They count on you giving up. They count on you not having proof. But I had proof. I just needed to figure out how to use it without tipping my hand too early. My phone buzzed. A text from my manager. Shift starts at 3. Do not be late. We are short-staffed. I work night shifts doing data analysis for a logistics company. My car is my lifeline. If Tiffany followed through on her tow threat, I could lose my job. That was the time pressure. She knew it. She had probably looked up my schedule. I grabbed my keys and headed out. I needed to talk to someone who understood code enforcement. Someone who could confirm what was actually enforceable and what was just Tiffany making things up. I drove to the city planning office and asked for the code enforcement officer. A guy named Dan came out to the counter. He had a badge clipped to his belt and a stack of files under his arm. I explained the situation in under 2 minutes. Shed. Permits. HOA threatening removal. Dan frowned. Do you have the original permit? I slid a copy across the counter. He scanned it. This is valid. If the shed was permitted before the HOA covenant was updated, it is grandfathered. They cannot touch it. I asked if he could put that in writing. He printed a 1-page letter on city letterhead and handed it to me. If they keep pushing, call me. I will come out and cite them for harassment. I thanked him and left. That was ally number 1. I needed more. I got home at noon. There was a notice on my door. Bright orange stamp. Non-compliance confirmed. Fine pending. Hearing scheduled for Monday at 6. Monday was 4 days away. The hearing was after my shift started, which meant I would have to call in sick and risk getting written up. Tiffany had timed it perfectly. I went inside and checked the neighborhood group chat. Someone had posted a screenshot of a message from Tiffany. Subject line: Repeat offender update. The message claimed I had a history of violations and that the board was considering a ban from amenities. It was a lie. I had never been cited for anything before this week, but the post was already getting reactions. Neighbors I barely knew were commenting, saying they had noticed my shed and wondered when someone would do something about it. That was escalation step 1. Tiffany was painting me as a problem in front of the entire neighborhood, using a fabricated history to justify whatever she did next. I screenshot the post and added it to my binder. Then I opened the portal to upload a formal response. I attached the city letter and a copy of the original permit. I clicked submit. The upload failed. Error, file size too large. I compressed the files and tried again. Error, session expired. I logged out and logged back in. The upload button was grayed out. That was the side complication. My portal uploads were failing right when the deadline hit. It was either sabotage or the worst timing in history. Either way, I could not submit my defense digitally. I called the management company. A staffer answered. I explained the portal issue. She put me on hold for 6 minutes. When she came back, she said the portal was under maintenance, and I would need to submit documents in person. I asked when the office was open. She said Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. It was Friday at 1. I had 2 hours. I printed everything, stuffed it into a folder, and drove to the management office. The building was a low brick cube with a parking lot and a sign that said Briarstone Property Management. Inside, the lobby was empty except for a reception desk and a staffer behind a plexiglass window. I handed her the folder. I need to submit this for the hearing on Monday. She opened the folder and flipped through the pages. Then she frowned. This is missing the complaint response form. I blinked. What form? She pulled out a blank sheet from a drawer. You have to fill this out. It is required for all hearing submissions. I had never seen that form before. It was not mentioned in the notice. It was not on the portal. I asked if I could fill it out now. She shook her head. You have to submit it with the original documents. If you did not include it, your submission is incomplete. I felt my jaw tighten. So I have to resubmit everything? She nodded. You can drop it off Monday before the hearing. Monday was the hearing. That meant I would have no time to prepare. That was escalation step 2. Tiffany was trying to ban me from the process entirely by adding requirements that did not exist until I tried to comply. I took the form and left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and called Dan, the code enforcement officer. I explained the new form requirement. He laughed. That is not a city requirement. That is them making things up. Do not fill it out. Just show up Monday with what you have. If they try to dismiss you for a form that does not exist, I will testify. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called a neighbor I barely knew, a guy named Mark who had been in the HOA for 10 years. I asked if he had ever seen a complaint response form. Mark paused. No, but that sounds like something Tiffany would do. She did the same thing to a guy 2 years ago. Added a requirement at the last minute, so he missed the deadline. He ended up paying the fine just to make it stop. I asked if he would be willing to come to the hearing as a witness. He hesitated. I do not want to get on her bad side. I understood. Tiffany controlled vendors. If Mark needed a plumber or an electrician, she could blacklist him. But I pressed. If you do not speak up, she will keep doing this to everyone. He sighed. Fine, I will be there. But if she asks, I am just there to observe. That was ally number 2. I spent the weekend building my case. I printed every email, every portal screenshot, every denial letter. I organized them by date and flagged the inconsistencies. The denial letter dated before the upload. The portal log showing my uploads. The city permit. The code enforcement letter. The fake form. The group chat post. Everything was tabbed and ready. On Monday, I called in sick to work. My manager was not happy, but I had no choice. The hearing was at 6. I arrived at 5:45. The meeting was in a conference room at the management office. Inside, there were 3 board members at a table. Tiffany sitting off to the side with a stack of files, and about a dozen neighbors in folding chairs. The board president, a man in his 60s with reading glasses, called the meeting to order. First item. Violation hearing for Lot 42. Unapproved storage structure. Tiffany stood up. The homeowner was notified on Wednesday. He has failed to comply. The structure is in violation of the setback covenant and must be removed. I recommend a fine of $2,000 and a compliance deadline of 30 days. I raised my hand. Can I speak? The president nodded. I stood up and opened my binder. I submitted a records request 2 weeks ago. It was denied. I resubmitted. It was denied again. I tried to upload my defense through the portal. The portal failed. I went to the office in person. I was told I needed a form that does not exist. I brought the form anyway. I also brought proof that the shed is permitted by the city and grandfathered under the original covenant. I walked to the table and handed the board president the binder. Inside were the certified mail receipts, the city letter, the permit, and the portal screenshots. The president flipped through the pages. His expression changed. He looked at Tiffany. Did you deny his records request? Tiffany shrugged. The request was incomplete. He did not specify which records he needed. I pulled out a copy of my original request and read it aloud. I request the original complaint filed against Lot 42, the inspection report dated this month, and the enforcement timeline showing prior violations. That is word for word what I submitted. Tiffany crossed her arms. Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth. The room went silent. One of the board members, a woman in her 50s, leaned forward. Did you just say his evidence does not matter? Tiffany backpedaled. I meant that the official record is what the board relies on. Individual recordings are not admissible. I held up my phone. This recording shows you threatening to remove my property without a signed work order. It also shows your contractors refusing to proceed because they knew it was illegal. The board president held up a hand. Let's take a step back. Do we have the original complaint? Tiffany hesitated. It is in the file. Pull it, please. She opened her stack and pulled out a single sheet. She handed it to the president. He read it and frowned. This complaint is dated last Monday, but your notice says the violation was confirmed last Wednesday. How did you confirm a violation 2 days before the complaint was filed? Tiffany did not answer. The president looked at me. Do you have anything else? If you are enjoying this, hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama. I pulled out the final piece. 3 years ago, a homeowner named Greg Patel was fined for unapproved paint. The association claimed he never submitted a request, but I found a portal screenshot showing he did. The upload was confirmed on March 3, 2022. The denial letter is dated March 1st. Someone backdated the denial to make it look like he never submitted. I handed the screenshot to the president. He stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at Tiffany. Do you want to explain this? Tiffany stood up. That case is closed. We are not relitigating it. The president shook his head. If this is true, it means we have been enforcing violations based on falsified records. That is a serious problem. One of the neighbors in the back row stood up. It was Mark. I have seen her do this before. She adds requirements after people submit. She moves deadlines. She loses paperwork. She has been doing it for years. Another neighbor spoke up. She did it to me last year. I submitted a fence approval. She said it was denied. Then I found out she never forwarded it to the board. The room erupted. Neighbors started shouting over each other. Tiffany tried to talk over them, but no one was listening. The board president banged a gavel. Order. We are going to table this hearing and open an internal audit. I am recommending that a neutral hearing officer be appointed for all future enforcement actions. Tiffany, you are barred from acting as enforcer or investigator pending the results of the audit. Tiffany slammed her files on the table. You cannot do this. I have authority under the bylaws. The president cut her off. Your authority is suspended. If you interfere with this audit, I will recommend your removal from the board entirely. She grabbed her files and stormed out. The room stayed loud for another 10 minutes. The board president eventually called the meeting to a close and said he would send an update by the end of the week. I stayed in my seat while people filed out. A few neighbors came up to thank me. One of them, an older woman, said she had wanted to speak up for years but was afraid of retaliation. Another guy said he had been thinking about selling his house because of Tiffany. Now he was thinking about staying. Mark walked over. I did not think you would actually pull it off. I closed my binder. I almost did not. But she made a mistake. She used the same playbook twice. Once I saw the pattern, it was just a matter of documenting it. He nodded. What happens now? I shrugged. The audit. The hearing officer. Maybe the board votes her out. Or maybe she resigns before it gets that far. He smiled. Either way, you just made a lot of people very happy. I left the building and sat in my car for a minute. My hands were shaking. I had spent 2 weeks preparing for that hearing, and it had gone better than I expected. But I knew it was not over. Tiffany still had allies. She still controlled vendor relationships. If she wanted to keep fighting, she could make my life miserable in a dozen other ways. But I also knew something she did not. I had a trump card. and I had not used it yet. The next morning, I got an email from the board president. Subject line: Audit update. The message said the board had voted to hire an outside compliance consultant to review all enforcement actions from the past 3 years. The consultant would have access to all records, including portal logs, complaint files, and vendor contracts. The audit would take 4 weeks. Tiffany was placed on administrative leave during the review. I forwarded the email to Dan, the code enforcement officer, and to Mark. Then I opened the group chat. Someone had already posted about the hearing. The comments were split. Half the neighbors were celebrating. The other half were defending Tiffany, saying she was just doing her job and that I was stirring up trouble. One comment stood out. It was from someone I did not recognize. I heard they are trying to recall the entire board. If that happens, we are going to lose our security. Tiffany is the only one who keeps the rules enforced. That comment had 16 likes. It told me everything I needed to know. Tiffany had a base. She had people who believed her version of events. And if the audit did not find enough evidence, she could spin this as a witch hunt and come back stronger. I could not let that happen. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I had been holding. It was a video file, 42 seconds long, recorded on a Ring doorbell camera owned by my next-door neighbor, a guy named Jeff, who had agreed to share it with me after I told him what I was investigating. The video showed Tiffany walking up to my property at 11:30 at night, 2 weeks before the shed inspection. She was carrying a flashlight and a clipboard. She walked around the shed, took photos with her phone, and left. She never knocked on my door. She never announced herself. She never filed a report about the visit. The video proved Tiffany had trespassed. It also proved she had conducted an inspection without notice, which violated the association's own rules. And it raised a bigger question. If she was inspecting my property in secret, whose else was she inspecting? I sent the video to the board president with a short note. This was recorded 2 weeks before the official complaint. I think you will find it relevant to the audit. He responded an hour later. Thank you. This changes things. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. I answered. It was the compliance consultant the board had hired. Her name was Angela. She introduced herself and asked if I would be willing to sit for an interview as part of the audit. I said yes. She asked if I had any additional evidence beyond what I had submitted at the hearing. I told her about the video. She asked me to send it. I did. 2 days later, Angela called again. She said the audit had expanded. They were now reviewing every enforcement action Tiffany had overseen in the past 5 years. They had found 16 cases with irregularities, backdated notices, missing complaint forms, denied records requests, portal upload failures that coincided with hearing deadlines. In 3 cases, homeowners had been fined for violations that were later found to be compliant. Angela asked if I knew Greg Patel, the homeowner from 2022. I said I did not know him personally, but I had his contact information from an old email thread. She asked me to forward it. I did. A week later, Greg called me. He said Angela had reached out and asked him to submit his records. He sounded cautious, like he did not believe anything would come of it. I told him what had happened at the hearing. He laughed. I wish I had done what you did. I just paid the fine and moved. I did not think anyone would care. I told him people cared now. He said he would submit everything he had. The audit report came out 3 weeks later. It was 34 pages long. I printed the whole thing and read it twice. The findings were devastating. The report confirmed that Tiffany had systematically backdated notices, denied records requests without cause, and conducted inspections without following the required procedures. It also confirmed that she had used vendor relationships to pressure homeowners, threatening to withhold services if they filed complaints. The report recommended 5 actions. 1. Terminate Tiffany's position as vendor coordinator. 2. Appoint a neutral hearing officer for all future enforcement actions. 3. Refund all fines issued in the 16 flagged cases. 4. Revise the records request policy to include mandatory timelines and appeal procedures. 5. Refer the findings to the association's legal counsel for possible further action. The board voted to accept all 5 recommendations. Tiffany resigned the next day. She sent a 1-sentence email to the board president. I resign effective immediately. No explanation, no apology, just 1 sentence. The neighborhood group chat exploded. Some people celebrated. Others said the board had overreacted and that Tiffany had been unfairly targeted. One person posted a long defense of her, claiming she had been the only person willing to enforce the rules and that the association would fall apart without her. I did not respond. I did not need to. The audit report spoke for itself. 2 weeks later, the board held a special meeting to discuss vendor contracts. It turned out Tiffany had been the sole point of contact for every vendor the association used. Landscaping, pool maintenance, security, pest control, all of them. And none of the contracts had been reviewed in over 3 years. The board hired a new management company to take over vendor coordination. Within a month, they had renegotiated every contract and saved the association over $40,000 a year. One of the vendors admitted that Tiffany had been taking kickbacks in exchange for steering business their way. The board referred that finding to the police. I got a refund check for the fine I had been threatened with. I also got a formal apology letter from the board president. The letter said the board recognized the harm that had been caused and was committed to rebuilding trust with homeowners. It was a nice gesture, but I was not holding my breath. HOAs do not change overnight. Greg Patel got a refund check too, $4,000 plus interest. He called me when it arrived. He sounded relieved. I told him I was glad it worked out. He said he was thinking about moving back to the neighborhood now that Tiffany was gone. I told him that was his call, but the association was definitely better than it had been. A month after the audit, I was walking to my car when a woman I did not recognize stopped me. She said she lived 3 streets over and had been following the case. She said she had a storage shed too, and Tiffany had threatened her with a fine 2 years ago. She had paid it because she did not know how to fight back. She asked if she could get a refund now that the audit was done. I told her to contact the board president and reference the audit report. She thanked me and walked away. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the binder I had built. Certified mail receipts, portal screenshots, the city letter, the ring video, the audit report. It was a paper trail that had taken 4 weeks to assemble, and it had worked. The pattern was clear, the evidence was undeniable, and the consequences were real. Tiffany was gone. The vendor contracts were renegotiated. The enforcement process was reformed, and 16 homeowners got refunds. It was not perfect, but it was progress. I thought about the cold case that had started it all. Greg Patel. The backdated denial. The missing complaint. If I had not reopened that case, none of this would have happened. Tiffany would still be threatening homeowners. The vendor kickbacks would still be happening. The records would still be treated like private property. But I had reopened it, and once I started pulling the thread, the whole thing unraveled. A few days later, I got an email from Angela, the compliance consultant. She said the board had asked her to stay on as a permanent advisor. She was going to oversee all enforcement actions and conduct quarterly audits to make sure the reform stuck. She thanked me for my cooperation and said my records had been instrumental in building the case. I replied with a short thank you and closed the laptop. The neighborhood group chat was quieter now, fewer arguments, fewer accusations. A few people posted about upcoming events. Someone organized a block party. Someone else asked for recommendations for a plumber. It was normal, boring, exactly what a neighborhood should be. I did not post anything. I just watched and waited, because I knew HOAs do not change overnight. People do not change overnight. And patterns do not disappear just because one person gets caught. But for now, the pattern was broken. And that was enough. A month later, I was sitting on my porch when a truck pulled up. 2 men got out. They were wearing reflective vests. One of them had a tool bag. The other had a clipboard. My chest tightened. I stood up and walked to the driveway. Can I help you? The guy with the clipboard smiled. We are here for a routine inspection. The new management company sent us. We just need to check the meter and make sure everything is up to code. He handed me a work order. It had the date, the time, and a reference number. It was official. It was transparent. It was exactly what an inspection should be. I let them do their work. They were done in 10 minutes. The guy with the clipboard handed me a copy of the report. Everything is good. No issues. Have a nice day. They left. I stood in the driveway and watched them drive away. Then I went inside and added the report to my binder. The reforms were working. The new process was working. The transparency was working. It was not perfect, but it was better. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I went back to work. Night shifts. Data analysis. Tracking patterns and timelines. It was routine. It was predictable. It was exactly what I needed after 4 weeks of chaos. One night, my manager pulled me aside. He said he had heard about the HOA situation. A friend of his lived in Briarstone and had been following the case. He said he was impressed that I had stuck with it. He said most people would have given up. I told him I had thought about giving up, but once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. And once I had the evidence, I had to use it. He nodded. That is the job. You see the pattern, you document it, and you follow it to the end. Same thing we do here. I laughed. I guess it is. He walked away. I went back to my desk and opened the system. There were 100 data points waiting to be analyzed. I started sorting. The rhythm was familiar. The work was calming. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the association. I opened it, bracing for another notice. But it was not a notice. It was an invitation. The board was hosting a community meeting to discuss the audit findings and answer questions. They wanted homeowners to participate. They wanted input. They wanted transparency. I marked the date on my calendar. The meeting was on a Saturday. I showed up early. The conference room was packed, over 50 homeowners. Some of them I recognized from the hearing, others I had never seen before. The board president stood at the front with Angela, the compliance consultant. He opened with an apology. He said the board had failed to provide oversight and that the audit had exposed serious problems. He said the reforms were in place and that the board was committed to rebuilding trust. He said it would take time, but he believed the association could move forward. Then Angela spoke. She outlined the 5 recommendations and explained how they were being implemented. The neutral hearing officer, the revised records policy, the vendor contract review, the refund process. She took questions for over an hour. People were angry. People were frustrated. But people were also listening. At the end of the meeting, the board president opened the floor for final comments. A woman in the back row stood up. She said she had been living in the neighborhood for 15 years and had never felt safe questioning the board. She said the audit had changed that. She said she hoped the reforms would stick. Another person stood up. He said he had been fined twice by Tiffany and had paid both times because he did not know he could fight back. He said he was grateful that someone had finally stood up to her. Then Mark stood up. He pointed at me. That guy right there reopened a cold case and exposed a pattern of abuse that had been going on for years. He did not do it for himself. He did it because it was the right thing to do. And I think we owe him a thank you. The room erupted in applause. I felt my face go red. I nodded and stayed in my seat. I did not want attention. I just wanted the reforms to work. The meeting ended. People filed out. A few stopped to shake my hand. One guy said he had been thinking about running for the board and asked if I would consider it. I said no. I had done my part. Someone else could take it from here. I walked to my car and sat for a minute. The sun was setting. The parking lot was empty. The neighborhood was quiet. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could let go. I started the car and drove home. The route took me past the management office. The lights were off. The parking lot was empty. The sign still said Briarstone Property Management, but the association behind that sign was different now. The people were different, the process was different, and the culture was starting to change. It was not perfect, it would never be perfect, but it was better, and that was enough. A few weeks later, I was walking to my mailbox when I saw a new sign near the entrance to the neighborhood. It was small and professional. Briarstone Property Owners Association. Community meetings, second Saturday of every month. All homeowners welcome. I took a photo and sent it to Greg. He replied a minute later. That is progress. I smiled and walked back to my house. The shed was still there. The permits were still valid. The fines were gone. And the pattern was broken. I went inside and closed the door. I opened my laptop and archived the binder. I did not need it anymore. The case was closed. The reforms were in place. And the neighborhood was moving forward. But I kept the ring video. Just in case. Because patterns do not disappear. They just go quiet. And if Tiffany or someone like her ever came back, I would be ready. But for now, I was done. The cold case was solved. The culprit was caught. And the consequences were real. The HOA had canceled the vendor relationship tied to the abuse. Karen's own selective enforcement had been documented in the minutes. And a third-party compliance report had cleared me completely. The meeting had even voted to accept the reforms, while Tiffany tried to interrupt and stop it. It was over, and I could finally breathe. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.